Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge podcast. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and today's guest is Stacy Leeds. She is the Willard H. Pedrick Dean and Regents Professor at Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University. Welcome, Dean Leeds.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
What a great name for a college of law, that's for sure. When did you all become the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law?
So back in 2006, just shortly after she stepped down from the Supreme Court and came back home here to Arizona, she gave us permission to use her name at that point. And it was quite an honor, but a heavy lift in terms of what we do every day to preserve her legacy. It's great.
Oh, absolutely. What a tremendous role model and namesake. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. And I would love to hear a little bit about your entree into deaning, because this is not your first rodeo, if we can say that. So tell us a little bit about where you taught and what inspired you to be a dean and how you got to Arizona State.
Sure. So I am a big fan of public education and public law schools. So my path has been entirely public law schools and legal ed. Started in one of the LLM programs at the University of Wisconsin, the Hasty Fellowship. And then I directed the Indian law programs at North Dakota and Kansas. And in each of those roles, never was really a full-time faculty member exclusively. I was always running a center or something along those lines. So it just kind of was second nature that I was drawn to administrative work and fundraising and the things that grow those skill sets. So in 2011, I took the position at University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and became dean there following Cindy Nance, who's back there now on a second pass as dean. And I was dean there for 7 years, and it was a great school, great opportunity. So that was the first pass. And then I went into central administration and was a vice chancellor for 3 years, and then took a break away from administration and came out here to ASU to be on the faculty. And then shortly after I came here, I took the opportunity to be the dean again. And now I'm in my third year. So as we were talking about before, just surpassed the 10-year mark on the law dean world. So it's been fun, but I've seen a lot.
You have seen a lot, and a vice chancellor role in between. My goodness. Do you prefer deaning or vice chancelling?
Well, the best job on a university campus is the law dean role. So I can say that with great knowledge and experience. There's just nothing like it.
I think you're right. I think there's a great joy in being with those of your profession and leading them. And they're somewhat homogenous, right? The faculty and the students, and certainly more so than other colleges on a campus.
Well, and just the special role that law schools get to play in the legal profession. That's hard to replicate anywhere else.
It really is. Well, I'm glad that we've had you in the dean ranks for 10 years through your two experiences. And you have done a lot of innovative things in your 3 years at Arizona State. I'd love to start by talking about your partnership with the Navajo Nation. You've worked in some Indian law programs, as you mentioned, leading some programs. So what is it that you inspired at Arizona State or built on?
Yeah, so our law school is located in a state where there are 22 tribal nations. And so even in the early years of our now still very young law school, we just passed 55-year mark. But every dean of this law school has recognized that given where we are here in the Southwest, there has to be an interaction with the tribal nations. And there's a big responsibility on this law school to help grow the next leaders that will work with those tribes. So Navajo Nation is the largest tribe in the United States by number and by land base. And their reservation sets in 3 different states, and Arizona is one of those. So their capital city of Window Rock is in Arizona. And, over the years, we've had a number of Navajo Nation citizens who came through this law school, either in the JD program or in one of our graduate programs. But we were just trying to work with the tribe to help them solve for a problem. And the problem that they have is what problems that you see throughout rural America across the boards. And there's a significant legal desert problem, right? There's not enough lawyers and advocates and judges to fill the needs of that community. So we just worked together to see what we could do to potentially move the needle. Navajo Nation has their own bar exam and their own bar association, so it truly functions similar to how the states govern themselves, and it's a completely separate legal system. And so getting a unique pipeline of people coming through to become advocates or lawyers there, it's a highly specialized piece. But what we thought we could help with is, no law school has an arrangement with a tribal college where the tribal college could have a bachelor's degree program in law. You know that when you look all over the globe, oftentimes the legal education is a bachelor's degree and then an apprenticeship type program. And so what we worked together to create is Dene College, their tribal college, did create a 4-year degree in law, and the first cohort started this fall. So they're currently going through that 4-year degree. And then we're helping out from the talent pipeline side of things, helping provide particularly some legal writing instructors who both teach in the law school, but also could teach at the tribal college. So what we designed is a very intense 4-degree program where if someone truly is coming out of high school or just starting their undergraduate degree, they would go to the tribal college, complete that 4-year bachelor's degree. If they wanted to go ahead and sit and take the Navajo bar, that's permissible for lay advocates to take that bar. So that would be one entree or pathway for a student. But we realize that there's a lot of people who already have a bachelor's degree and maybe they're mid-career and want to shift gears into the law. So in our master's degree program, we're creating an emphasis in Navajo Nation law where we can train up people to have the skill set to then enter the legal profession for the Navajo Nation from that route. And then, of course, we've already got our JD students coming through our law school with a high percentage of Navajo students in that program. And then we rounded it out with a future LLM. There are a handful of Navajo Nation jurists who have written the text about the evolution of Navajo Nation common law and fundamental law. And so we look out to that next generation and say, who are going to be the Justice Bob Yazzies of that next generation. So we'll have a few students eventually in that LLM program where their entire focus will be on the development and evolution of Navajo Nation law. So in theory, you could get all 4 degrees, but we've just got people coming in and out of each of those programs where it fits their life.
That is so exciting. I mean, that's such a breadth of opportunity depending on people's wants. And I didn't realize that they have their own bar exam. So if people were taking the JD versus studying in the college, the Deny College, and focusing on law, are there dramatic differences between those two legal systems? And are there high-level ways you can share how they are different?
Yeah, so substantively, there's significant difference in land and property law. There's significant difference in the application of family law and estates. So those would be the subject matter areas in particular. And then they're very well known at Navajo Nation through their court system for their peacemaking process, which in legal education, we would describe that as an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. But for centuries and thousands of years, they've had that legal system in place and are really the tribe that a lot of other tribal governments look to about how you thread that needle of preserving tribal common law, but also they, like any other government, are governed by a number of regulations and statutes and ordinances that their legislative body can't passes. So it's a combination of those two, but some of it would look very similar to walking into a county court, in any state across the union. So they've got a need for traditional law trained in terms of the JD sense. And so there will always be a need for more people in that area. But then the day-to-day cases there on the reservation where you could have well-trained legal advocates taking those cases as a way to address that access to justice issue, they've done that for many years. And the interesting thing here in Arizona is our Supreme Court, Arizona Supreme Court, has been really innovative about thinking through solutions to some of these problems in the state courts. And so this state's the first state that passed the paraprofessional licensing programs where someone can take subject matter specific test and then get a limited license to practice law, certain kinds of cases, certain types of subject matter. So it's happening in the state too. And we think for those advocates on Navajo Nation that also might be licensed state paraprofessionals, they could serve those counties that abut the reservation in addition to being licensed there on Navajo itself.
I've been really impressed with the innovation that Arizona has shown, the Arizona courts, to address these problems in the legal deserts. And there are just a few states who are doing it, and I think Arizona was leading that charge. Is the law school taking part outside of the Navajo Nation program with it taking part in the paraprofessional training?
Yes, our law school has about 2,000 students enrolled, and 55% of those students are not pursuing a JD or an LLM. They're pursuing one of the graduate programs that we have. So, master's in legal studies with multiple different emphasis areas, and then a couple of standalone graduate programs like sports law and business, and a master's degree program for human resources and employment law. So, the students who go through the master's in legal studies program, there's a focus area for those that want to sit and take this paraprofessional piece. And then a lot of the courses are geared toward the skills that they would need in that.
Is there any sort of examination for the paraprofessional program in Arizona?
There are, and the Arizona Supreme Court administers that in the same manner that they administer the typical bar exam. So the licensing and background and professional requirements different in terms of what is tested, but same process for licensure.
And I think the program's in existence for a few years now. Am I correct?
It has. It's been on the books for about 5 years now. It's slowly gaining steam, though. This past year, we had about 40 new students that are on that track to become a licensed paraprofessional, just starting our graduate program.
Do those of you in Arizona adjacent to the legal system or in legal education, are you seeing a difference in that meeting those access to justice needs and the legal desert needs?
It is. A number of the individuals that graduate from this program go into a private sector job, but there's a big push for recruitment in the government service jobs as well. Anybody who's had interaction with rural communities know that when you're talking about prosecutors and public defenders, but also the paralegals and the other advocates, they can post a job and it could be on the website for 6 months and they just can't fill the position. There's just that broad of a need. So the hope is that, and a number of people will start to fill those positions over time. But I would say at this point, if I had to guess, it's approximately 50 to 75 people who have gone through that process, past it at this point. So we're in the early years, but we're really starting to see an uptick in the number of people that are interested in that direction. So it'll grow quickly.
Well, and 50 to 75 is 50 to 75, right?
Exactly.
Well, these are some exciting in-person programs we've been talking about, but I know you have now entered into the foray of online education. So why don't you share a little bit about what ASU is doing in the online sector?
Yeah, and it is consistent with the same themes that I've been talking about. We decided that if we were going to go the route of the online JD, we wanted to make sure that it was part-time. And we wanted to take into consideration that people will be keeping at least a part-time job, if not a full-time job while doing it, and making space for an adult who's learning in those contexts. But we also wanted to solve for an identifiable problem rather than just take our law school and put it online. So the initial problems that we've identified for this state and nationally is, again, this legal deserts piece. So many people who are brilliant that are out there in these communities where they can't just pick up their life or their job and come to a public or private law school for a full 3-year window. So we want to take it to them where they can then access, legal education. So we're going to have an initial cohort of 20 to 25 people to start. And we'll be recruiting people who are living in communities where there are not enough lawyers, and that we hope that there's a commitment that they will stay there and work in those communities, be mentored by the attorneys that are there. And part of our commitment to them will be that student success will happen through our world, but it will also mean that they will rely on some of the people that are embedded in the communities in which they live. So the legal deserts piece is one aspect of the cohort. The other piece of it are these government law jobs that I mentioned, where it's not just in the places that we would describe as legal deserts, but it's in places like Maricopa County. I'm sitting here in the fifth largest metropolitan area in the United States, and there are government jobs here that there's not enough lawyers to fill. And so we also think that, given our legacy with Sandra Day O'Connor, she's the only modern day justice that had a law career in all three branches of government, right? And so that public service legacy is something that we always try to instill in our current students. But we thought that that combination of a cohort that has the legal desert need, but also a very strong commitment to public service. So those will be the two buckets of people that will make up that first cohort. And they'll be coming to us in January. Our applications are going to go live in June. I think that given your history in online education, you know how profound the need is for these kinds of programs. And so in a very soft launch, after the ABA green lighted us to do this, the response has been overwhelming in terms of people seeking access to this kind of arrangement. So we're very excited. I think it's going to address some of the problems that we've identified, but I think that this is the future of legal education. And we will probably all, at some point, have our traditional in-person law students. But I think that most law schools, if we were to crystal ball 10 or 20 years into our future, will have a lot of accessible programs like the one that you have and like the one that we now are launching.
Well, I am confident you are going to find that this need and interest continues. We have 3 cohorts in the building of about 25 students for our 4-year part-time program. And this year, I think we exceeded 1,200 applications for 25 spots. We thought as the number of law schools were added to those offering online modalities that the number of applications would go down, and the opposite has happened. But the students that you get you want to make a difference for them because they don't want to leave their family, or they can't afford to move, or their spouse is deployed, or whatever it is. So I really applaud you for doing this. I'm so glad so many of our peers have done it as well. And I think we will continue to see those increase.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in addition to the online legal education and your partnership with Navajo Nation, as if that wasn't enough, what else is going on with your law school that you're excited about?
Well, we have for several years now had a program in Washington, D.C., including a full building that we have access to out there. So we're the only law school besides the D.C. law schools that have an ABA-approved program there in Washington, D.C. And we've also got a space in downtown L.A. that Arizona State has purchased as well. And so for us, the mothership will always be in downtown Phoenix. That puts us so close to the law firms and the judges and all of industry. But having real opportunities on both coasts for our students has just been a game changer for student experiences and their ability to customize what their law school looks like. So originally, our program in DC, people would go out for a semester, take a class or two and an externship. But now we typically have between 5 and 7 in-person classes in any given semester. And I just came back from our graduation reception out there on Monday. Right now, we've got about 35 students per semester out of our JD class that go there. But at this point, our faculty has amended our rules to, if a student wanted to spend 3 semesters there in DC, it's possible to do so. They would just have to be very deliberate about the number of externships or online classes that they took and really take advantage of those in-person classes and a few online opportunities that we have for them. So it just is also, I think, the wave of the future for legal education is that it's not just in person or online and that you have these two choices, but I think more and more law schools, where possible, will create systems where a student can come in and truly customize their experience, during those 3 or 4 years in some cases. So I really enjoy those programs, and I love to see our students spread out geographically. That also includes some students working internationally as well.
So, is it a similar program on the West Coast for LA?
So the West Coast program is not as mature yet as the DC program, and it's a little harder to navigate physically. LA. So much dependency on driving around. What we find in LA is that the bulk of our alumni there are either in intellectual property or the entertainment law space. So we tend to encourage students in those two subject matter areas to spend some time there. And then, we rely on several of the local experts to teach some of those courses. But in DC, we'll have full-time faculty members each semester, swapping out to spend time there. So
That's incredible. Great opportunities for students and very diverse opportunities that you're providing. Now, was the law school the first mover for the DC and LA space, or was that something that was driven by the broader university?
yeah, in both contexts, Arizona State University as a whole purchased properties in each of these locations. And then the president, Michael Crow, looks to the deans and says, okay, we've got this building, you figure it out. And so it's been a lot of fun to figure out exactly what our use of that building would be. For our law school, we're the heaviest user for obvious reasons in DC. So we're afforded a couple of floors of that building, and it's a really remarkable space. So that's how the impetus of the two buildings. Now, we had a small program before that in DC, but having that home base with staff and student services, we keep a full-time career services professional, there in DC as well. So it really is essentially a satellite of our law school in terms of its full functionality.
I think I'm going to ask my president for a DC office building for Christmas. It's pretty great, right?
No, it was awesome. And President Crow's vision of this was just, so much happens through DC, but DC is also this wonderful global city. So a lot of our relationships for our university, throughout the world have some DC tie or connection to them as well. So that was a big piece of it.
And you mentioned international activities. What's going on with Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law internationally?
Yeah, one of the pieces of Justice O'Connor's legacy that I think not very many people know about is, she reinvented herself one more time when she came back here to Arizona and really started spending a lot of time on international rule of law and human rights issues. And so, we carry that piece of her legacy through our Law and Global Affairs Center. And for us, it's that same customized approach that we take to every other lens. I have found that law students are not as interested in the traditional study abroad programs that I used to teach in, and many people are familiar, where you have 10 American law students go internationally and then sit in a room with those same 10 or 12 American law students, right? That's not the experience that will broaden their horizons as much. So we look at it more as if a student has a particular interest in a single country or in a particular subject matter, we try to match them with someone that they can actually go to work for and then supplement them, with classes. So connecting them to externship opportunities and programs like that seem to be the sweet spot for what our students are wanting right now. We still occasionally will partner with another law school if there's a consistent international program, but we're enjoying this customized approach right now. And I think that's how we'll continue.
That's ideal for students to have that kind of customization. What are some of the countries you have students placed in currently?
Yeah, so this semester and last, South Africa, we had a student working in The Hague, one student in China. And so I think Latin America and South America are the only areas that we didn't have a student placed in last year. But of course, there's interest in that. And one new faculty member who's joining us has been doing these traveling classes. David Lopez, former dean at Rutgers, will be joining our faculty. And he's been doing these traveling classes, taking people to Cuba, taking people to Mexico for a week or two at the time. So when he gets here, we'll plug him into that type of arrangement that we use quite a bit too. I'll tell you a fun thing that I got to do. As dean, it's hard to teach a class for the full semester, a 3 or 4 credit class. So in our Indian legal program, which I teach in for 15 years now, we've been doing these traveling classes where we really focus short term in some place-based learning. So 2 years ago, I took a group of students to Anchorage, Alaska to study Alaska Native legal issues. And then this spring break, we took 17 students to Hawaii and did the same over spring break, really relying on the local experts that practice in that area every day, but me formulating the class and the content, and of course, grading the papers on the back end. But such an eye-opening experience when you can be fully immersed in a legal culture that you might not have familiarity for, even if you study a related area. It's just so nuanced and so specialized.
Really exceptional. That's exciting to hear about. Well, before we conclude, and I feel like you could tell me all afternoon about the things that your school is doing. How wonderful to have a namesake who did so many things. Really covering so much ground. But if you can share with me a little more about what you think we will see in legal education in the coming decade.
I think that more and more law schools are going to open up the accessibility to legal education in ways we've never dreamt of. Some of it are these online JDs, but so many law schools now are doing what we're doing and having master's degree programs for people in industry. And I was a skeptic of these programs, 10 years ago. But seeing how much the students in these programs have their lives and dreams transformed as much or more than the students in our JD programs, now I'm a disciple. This idea that legal knowledge is only available to a small handful of us, and everyone else needs to consult with a lawyer because they can't handle or process or understand the concepts. I think that way of thinking has to go by the wayside. And so these programs, let's take the example of the Masters in Human Resources and Employment Law. Imagine everyone's HR experience if the person that they were talking to had some awareness of legal and regulatory issues and what that meant, and that they knew enough about those process to know when it's time to consult an attorney, but the awareness factor. There's so many industries like that one that could benefit from both leaders and people in the trenches that have had access to a legal education, even though a slightly different one than what you get in other degree programs. So I think that kind of thinking will expand. I think that the way that we teach in law schools 10 years from now will be very different. We are a slow, conservative bunch when it comes to how we teach and the way we teach.
Sure are.
Just like the rest of technology and other industries are rapidly accelerating, I'm seeing it across certain sectors of legal education right now, and I think that it'll continue to take off. I think it has to.
Well, I think you're definitely right on all points. And I too am, since I joined St. Mary's, a disciple of the master's programs. They can be just so transformational for the people who take them. And if only everyone we had to deal with in our careers had some legal knowledge, all be better for everyone. Well, thank you so much, Stacy Leeds, Dean of the Sandra Day O'Connor Arizona State University College of Law, for joining this afternoon. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, I hope you will listen to additional thought leaders in legal education on the Aspen Leading Edge podcast on your favorite podcast channel.